Look, let's talk about some, well, effectively medical matters this morning. Australia is to become the latest country to legalise cannabis for medicinal and scientific purposes. Campaigners in Britain say the government here needs to follow suit. Peter Reynolds is one of those campaigners. Morning, Peter. Nice to see you again. Look, I mean, whenever we talk about the legal situation surrounding cannabis, always people view it as to whether we're going to see it sort of on the streets or in the cafes or whatever a lot more freely. Australia's position here for medicinal and scientific obviously is ring fencing it to a certain degree. What is the problem with the government's position? Why is that not being considered here?
Well, I think it suits the government very well to confuse and conflate the issues around medicinal cannabis with recreational use of cannabis. I mean, we are now almost the last first world country in the world that is adopting this Luddite position. You know, there are 210 million people in the States who have legal access to medicinal cannabis, 250 million people in Europe, 30 million people in Canada, 8 million people in Israel, and now there's going to be 40 million people in Australia. And the evidence is overwhelming, but the government simply says no.
The evidence, though, in terms of medicinal, and we're effectively talking pain relief, aren't we?
Principally.
It is cannabinoids. Now, they can be extracted and I don't know, put into a tablet form or whatever, so used effectively in that way. Would that not be a more sensible way forward than saying people should be smoking cannabis or, I don't know, eating cannabis?
Smoking is not the best way to consume cannabis. You know, the leading edge, if you like, method of consuming cannabis is vaporizing, which doesn't produce the harmful products of combustion. But however you consume it, the important point, and there's now strong scientific evidence for this, is that cannabis is not a medicine that can be treated in the same way as single molecule medicines. And even the chap Jeffrey Guy, who leads GW Pharma, who produced the one legal form of cannabis medicine, says this as well now. There's a thing called the entourage effect, which is well recognized in science now. That it's the combination of all the compounds working together that actually produces the relief. But it's not just about pain. I mean there are some... our government has the evidence. You know, the Liberal Democrats before the election opened the door for us to government, and we met a lot of ministers, in particular George Freeman, the Life Science Minister, and he asked me to produce a summary of the evidence, and we produced this for them in April. A summary of all the evidence, or not all the evidence, in fact there's so much evidence that we could only look at 5 particular conditions: cancer, chronic pain, Alzheimer's. There's very good evidence, for instance, that smoking cannabis or using cannabis moderately in middle age will actually delay the onset of dementia to the point where you'll never develop Alzheimer's. Now there's good evidence for this, several studies across the world in very reputable organisations, but our government refuses to let this out.
What is the sticking point for all the politicians? Is it the lack of clarity between the dividing line of recreational use and medicinal use, and that one might be really misappropriating the use of the cannabis and saying that it's for medicinal when actually it's recreational, which then veers into a criminal act?
Well, I think you're right. But I mean, I had a meeting with one of David Cameron's closest and most senior cabinet colleagues just the other day before the debate, before the cannabis debate. And he said to me quite straightforwardly, we're not going to legalise medicinal cannabis because that will lead on to us legalising it generally. Now, what does that mean? That means that we are denying people in pain and suffering cheap, effective relief, cheap, safe, effective relief, which all the evidence supports. We're denying it because we want to stop people using cannabis recreationally. The fact of the matter is it's completely ridiculous. Anybody who wants to use cannabis recreationally nowadays can get it easily. It's available on every street corner, if you like. You know, the government likes to conflate the two issues because they don't want to be seen as soft on drugs. And that's the big issue. Ministers, politicians, we're beginning to see it change a little bit now. We're beginning to see more and more MPs in all parties beginning to recognise the medicinal issue. But it's no longer acceptable for our government just to say no. They don't present any evidence. I challenge them. If there is any evidence to support the maintenance of present policy about medicinal cannabis, let's see it.
Peter, good to talk to you. There's a challenge, and there will be politicians watching this morning. So let's see it. As Peter says, it'd be interesting to widen this debate and maybe get you head-to-head. That would be quite interesting, wouldn't it, Peter? Thanks very much indeed.